Chapter 17. Familiars. Okay, I told a little lie. My updated chaps aren't quite ready. Any more thoughts? I'll post edited ch1 tomorrow. Nagini wound through network of tunnels that ran through her master's immense castle. She had missed this place during the many cold winters she had spent nursing her master's broken form. But now he had healed himself and the great serpent spirit had lifted his banishment and allowed him to return. Her master's hatchling was a great joy to her. As well, she was confident that he would soon overcome his fear of her and they would have a nice chat. Master's hatchling's hatchling, she corrected herself. It made little difference to her, but her master was a stickler for such things. The fact that Snake has a lacking finger she could not really even count was a source of endless frustration to him. Nagini didn't see why he had to be so particular about such things. A few, a clutch. More than a clutch of those were sufficiently precise for Nagini. Nagini was tracking one of the strange two legs through the tunnels. She was only allowed to eat humans when her master gave his express permission, but these weren't humans, so, she reasoned, the rule didn't apply. Nagini was very proud of herself for figuring this out, and wondered why she hadn't thought of this before. The little creature scampered along the tunnel, Nagini trailing behind it. It was scaled like a reptile, but also warm-blooded. Perhaps it was a strange lizard. The creature paused, and Nagini struck. She reared back, hissing, as her prey delivered a rough clout to her muzzle. A section bad snake is very naughty. A section the lizard reprimanded, shaking a fist. Nagini slunk back into the darkness. Maybe if she asked, her master would bring her a nice piglet. Sesfi made sure that master's pet was truly gone before she continued to the meeting. She didn't understand why master's pet was so terribly stupid, but it wasn't her place to ask. Their allegiance to Slytherin protected them. The castle always alerted them when Nagini was hunting. The house elf slid several hundred feet down a steep tunnel, landing in an immense pile of discarded clothes and bedding. Dozens of house elves watched her, their lizard-like claws allowing them to comfortably cling to the sheer rock surfaces of this cave. Sesfi, how goes our little master's education? Asked the eldest in the language of house elves. Very well, sir. He is learning many important magics. Will he be returning to the Hogwarts? Sesfi's ears drooped. I know he wishes to. He does not feel safe here. Her head bowed in shame. She had been given the great honor of being the little master's personal elf, and she had failed to make him feel safe and at home, and now he would leave them. The eldest sighed gustily. Little master is very important. Not only for his own sake. He helps keep the master whole. We must make him accept what it means to be Slytherin. We will make him stay until he understands. Another elf said. The great serpent does not want him to leave, murmured a female nearly as old as the eldest. Another said, the master is planning to find the little master a special friend of his own. Maybe that will help him understand. Harry took a small, polite mouthful of his lobster bisque. The food here was always delicious. Even better than Hogwarts. Though the house elves had yet to master pizza, the closest they had gotten was a rather thin, though tasty, quiche. I have been speaking with our patron, who is reluctant to allow you to leave for long periods of time. I have entered into some lengthy negotiations on your behalf, which I am certain you appreciate. Harry took a bit of his bread so he wouldn't have to reply. One of the conditions for your return to Hogwarts is that you take a familiar. I have a familiar. He objected. You have a pet, the Dark Lord corrected. A true familiar acts as a partner, allowing its master to reach greater magical heights. Nagini's head poked over the edge of the table. Her tongue flicked out, stealing a shrimp. I like Hedwig, Harry said stubbornly. I'm sure you do, Voldemort said in a patronizing tone. But the bird is not capable of bonding with you on the level that a true familiar is. Surely you've seen the advantages that Fawkes affords Dumbledore? He said. Now, Harry was seriously tempted. Nagini seriously creeped him out, but Fawkes was smart and powerful and just brilliant. Sure, Harry loved his owl, but Fawkes had helped him battle the basilisk, and had saved his life with his tears. Besides, he reasoned, I don't want to give him a reason to off Hedwig. So, how do you get a familiar, anyway? You will perform a ritual that, for lack of a better term, sends a request into the ether. Beings who are interested in a potential bond will respond to you. This particular ritual is only available to wizards of great power. Why? The rite drains an enormous amount of power. This power is both a beacon and a gift. It enables these creatures to meet with you in order to make their decision. That sounded rather exciting and scary. Voldemort drew a large book from the air and handed it to Harry. Though long and wide, the book was quite thin, containing perhaps 50 sheets of beautifully illuminated vellum. Read over that, and we shall begin preparations tomorrow. 1 week later, Harry fidgeted impatiently while Voldemort examined the runes Harry had painted on his own body, carefully following the directions in the book. The Sullacanta in this case Harry had to spend day in fasting and meditation. He had a rune representing 13 qualities, one for every lunar month, that he wanted or needed in a familiar painted on his skin. Some of these he chose, and some had been inspired by his meditation. Sesfi had escorted him through the immense gardens and greenhouses, allowing him to choose a variety of offerings for his prospective familiar. Voldemort's pale fingers twitched a hair's breadth from Harry's skin as he read each rune: protection, strength, friendship, loyalty, kindness. Latra. Really, Harry, you are looking for a familiar, not a buddy with whom to pub crawl. Harry wrinkled his brow at the Dark Lord's strange diction, but replied, "It's my right. I get to pick." Voldemort sighed. "Well, you should certainly pass your ancient runes OWL, at any rate." Harry clambered onto the immense stone slab and seated himself in the center, careful not to disturb any of the piles of herbs. There was Calendula for joy, Camellia for admiration, perfection, and Luck Clover for more luck, Cattail for peace, White Chrysanthemum for truth, Fern for sincerity, Iris for faith, hope, wisdom, and valor, and many more. And, of course, Halia his wand wood for goodwill, defense, domestic happiness, and foresight. The sun had soaked into the stone, making it uncomfortably warm. Harry picked up a tiny silver knife and pricked his finger, grimacing as he squeezed several fat, bloody drops into a stone bowl. He poured spring water he'd collected it himself last night into the bowl, and picked up a feather. Using the feather as a brush, he painted more runes in circle around him, chanting softly under his breath. Rather than fixing his mind on any one animal or even type of animal, he filled his mind with memories of many different animals. Fox, the Thestrals he had seen for the first time this year, Hedwig, Buckbeak, Padfoot, Moony, Basilisks, Snidgeets, all of these through his mind as he painted. Voldemort watched proudly as his heir painted the final symbols. Of course, the boy had no idea that this was a great rite, and was usually attempted by adults in their 30s or 40s, if at all. The average wizard simply hadn't the control until then. Of course, his heir was no average wizard, barely 15, and the great stone altar hummed with power as the boy slopped bloody water across the stone, chanting to himself. The boundary was thinning, and interested eyes were watching. Chapter 18, Getting to Know You. Harry tossed a handful of fragrant incense into the tiny brazier and lay back on the stone. Letting his mind drift as the book had suggested, he stared up at the clouds. Gradually, he realized that all of the clouds had lumpy, vague animal shapes, like the animal crackers Dudley used to get for his afternoon snack. The clouds floated down, or maybe Harry was floating up. It wasn't terribly important, really. The clouds changed, becoming tinted with brilliant pinks and golds, like a sunrise, and airy blues and purples, like twilight. Harry could hear a variety of noises: padding feet, beating wings, hisses, and snatches of eerie song. Dozens of presences reached out to him, touching him briefly before falling back, and above it all, Harry could sense a massive power, like a poised tsunami. He knew he was safe in its shadow. Voldemort watched as his heir's body slowly went limp as Harry's spirit went questing for its partner. He could sense the power of their patron observing the rite, deterring unsuitable applicants. Harry played happily in the sand. He had wandered away from the Dursleys and stumbled upon this strip of uninhabited beach. He was building a house for him and his real family to live in. Even though he didn't have a fancy shovel or bucket like Dudley, his perfect castle took shape under his careful hands. He found himself at towers and pretty stained glass windows, just like in the big church they had visited in London. One of the other children added a picture of a stained glass window that was all black with tiny silver dots and a crescent moon. Harry studied it thoughtfully for a moment before rubbing it away. It was pretty, but it didn't match his castle. Someone else added a flag. It had a scary picture of a skeleton. not a person's skeleton, but an animal with lots of sharp teeth. Like a shark. Harry yanked the flag from his castle and threw it away. He didn't like that at all. More and more kids visited, trying to add things to Harry's castle, but none of them were quite right. Harry was adding a courtyard to his castle. It had a high stone wall, and a flagstone floor. It needed something, but Harry wasn't sure what. A stone spur thrust up through the ground. Harry frowned, not liking the mess in his courtyard. The stone wiggled like jello, finally settling into a new shape. Now, 6 monkeys poured each other an endless stream of water. Harry laughed and clapped his hands, delighted with his new fountain. The monkey poised on the top of the tree had his tongue outstretched to catch the sparkling liquid that gushed from the jar he held. One monkey stood on tiptoe to catch the falling stream. Another monkey was frozen mid-leap trying to avoid the splashing water. The courtyard looked much better now. There was a big apple tree, perfect for climbing, which Harry eagerly tested. He snagged himself an apple. It was small, just the right size for his hand, and the yummiest apple he had ever had. Stuffing several apples in his pockets, he explored his castle. It was full of wonderful things that he had made, and lots of surprises, too. There was a big pool, just like he imagined, but he hadn't thought of the giant lily pads big enough for him to sit on. He tried that, too, or the blue and gold fish that swam in the water and nibbled at his toe. A little girl his own age sat on one of the lily pads, and gave him a wave. He waved back, admiring her pretty multicolored hair. Nice and cool from his swim, Harry went looking for his playground. It was his own playground with swings and monkey bars and no other kids to push him down or take his turn. Monkeys are real ones this time. Mia with brilliant red gold fur and black tails leapt from the bars to the trees and back again, pausing to applaud him with approving shrieks as he hung from the monkey bars by his knees. Birds in a rainbow of colors swooped about, performing their own acrobatics for his amusement. He watched the birds and monkeys play for a while, eating berries from the bushes that grew around the park, staining his face and fingers purple. Snack finished, Harry decided to have another go on the swings. He pumped his legs harder and harder, swinging high like he'd always dreamed of doing. Hearing laughter, he turned and saw a pretty lady swinging with him. She was a lot older than him, though not as old as Aunt Tunia. She was a lot prettier than his aunt too. She had a headdress sort of like the Indians on the telly, but the feathers were blue and green and gold and purple. Her eyes were slit-pupilled, like a snake's, which seemed pretty cool to Harry. She was wearing a mask of scales around her eyes. They were all rainbowy, like Aunt Tunia's opal earrings. He couldn't see the string that held the mask, and now the scales seemed to melt right into her skin. Maybe it was fancy makeup, like they did in the theater. She grinned at him, and said, "Ready to jump, Harry?" "We're so high up, I'll bet we'll fly." Harry beamed back, and let go of the chains at the very tippy top of his wing. Harry and the pretty lady fell and fell. They saw rainbow-tinted clouds, and strange birds, and even a dragon. It roared at them, which scared Harry until the pretty lady roared back. A cat with wings swooped by them, looking like any old ginger tabby except for the cream-colored wings on its back. It circled them, chirping like a bird, and zoomed off. They punched a hole in a cloud as they fell through it, and as Harry looked up, a giant snake poked its head through the hole and watched them fall. It had a hood like a cobra, but it was bright blue, like the sky, and had a silver tummy. The sun was setting as they fell through the leafy canopy of an immense forest. They had slowed down, and were now drifting downwards. Harry bumped into an immense snake that was pretending to be a tree limb. It gave him a gentle poke with its snout, dislodging him from the tree so he could continue his downward journey. It was nighttime when they landed on an immense tree branch. Uncle Vernon could have easily driven his car on it, it was so wide. The pretty lady was much older now, but still so very pretty. Harry knew with absolute certainty that she was the oldest person he had ever met. Her feathers were all silvery now, with just hints of their former rich colors. She picked Harry up and carried him to a mossy nest. Laying him down gently, she covered him with a blanket of feathers, or maybe it was a cloud. Harry was so sleepy, it was hard to tell. The pretty lady petted his hair gently, hummed a soft song as he drifted to sleep. Voldemort leaned forward eagerly, feeling the power of the right crest and hover for one endless heartbeat. He caught the scent of incense and the sound of musical latrino, giggling as the power dissipated. His heir had slipped from his deep trance into a more natural sleep. He would awaken soon. Voldemort frowned, searching for the familiar Harry had chosen. He was beginning to become annoyed when he caught sight of a small, brilliantly colored inchworm coiled on the boy's forehead. Frowning, he leaned forward, murmuring a spell to enhance his sight. The tiny creature rose up on dainty feet, spreading its wings, posing and awaiting his admiration. The ridiculous creature got no such thing. "A Quetzalcoatl," he grumbled. The glorified worm had the nerve to laugh at him. Harry yawned and stretched, savoring the last shreds of his strange but wonderful dream. Idly wondering at the lingering taste of apples on his tongue, he opened his eyes, only to shriek in alarm and scramble away. The Dark Lord's face was less than 6 inches from his own, staring intently at his forehead. Harry clapped his hands over his forehead, trying to both defend it from Voldemort and find out what was wrong. Something soft and warm took a firm grip on his forefinger. Eyes wide, he lowered his hand, staring at the marvelous little creature preening itself from its perch on his finger. Despite Voldemort's obvious disgruntlement, or perhaps because of it, Harry thought that Nuala was absolutely brilliant. Sure, she was tiny, but that meant he could carry her around with no trouble. He'd asked Sesfi to add a small, reinforced breast pocket to all of his shirts and robes, so Nuala could ride around with him whenever she liked. Until then, Nuala seemed perfectly happy perched on Harry's head, tiny talons gripping his hair, braced like the figurehead of some fantastical ship cresting a powerful wave. Flopping into his chair, Harry eagerly pulled all of his Care of Magical Creatures textbooks from his shelf, and began flipping through them. Fantastic Beast and Where to Find Them. The Quetzalcoatl is endemic to the rainforests of South America, though its name means bird snake in Nuala, the language spoken by many Mesoamerican cultures. It is actually a type of dragon. Its feathers are an especially potent magical ingredient. There are no records of Quetzalcoatl ever being in captivity. The Monster Book of Monsters. Quetzalcoatl, this unique and intelligent subspecies of dragon, is held sacred by the wizards of South America. These beings were considered divine by ancient Mesoamerican Muggles. The winged serpents, dragons, wyverns, and their relative Essa. The Quetzalcoatl is an offshoot of the subclass Draconia. It is more closely related to Oriental dragons than European or African members of this group. Taxonomy: Kingdom, Thalma. Animalia. Phylum, Chordata. Class, Xenosauria, Gr. Xeno. Strange, Saur lizard. Subclass, Draconia. Order, Musarada. Draconia. Gr. Mysterian. Mystery, Secret, Family, Aviderma. Draconia, Gr. Avisbird, Dermiskin. Genus, Plumateria, Gr. Turnwing. Lieutenant Plumifter. Species, Quetzalcoatl, Nail-feathered serpent or plumed serpent. The order Mustarada Draconia has only 6 species worldwide. Like the Quetzalcoatl, all of these creatures are associated with powerful, benevolent deities. Hence, these creatures are often considered conversant in the mysteries of the divine. Harry paused in his reading. "Hear that? Your sacred creature." "Like a cow," he added. Nuala hissed in annoyance. The Quetzalcoatl is the only member of both its genus and family. Pictorial records of feathered dragons exist in Egypt, but this creature has been extinct for several millennia. No preserved specimens have been found. Unlike most dragons, Quetzalcoatl are omnivorous. Insects, fruits, birds, rodents, and fish are their primary diet. Quetzalcoatl are inordinately fond of cacao, a drink made by the Aztec and Mayan peoples using cacao beans, vanilla, honey, and chilies. Harry said. That sounded gross. He studied the picture of a Quetzalcoatl drinking from a golden cup. The picture was part of an immense mural on a temple dedicated to the deity Quetzalcoatl. In fact, cacao's botanical name, Theobroma cacao, literally means food of the gods. Harry sighed. "You're awfully high maintenance, aren't you?" he said. Nuala ignored him in favor of chasing dust motes. Unlike mundane reptiles, dragons and their kin are capable of maintaining their body temperatures without outside assistance. However, they do not do this as efficiently as mammals. For this reason, Quetzalcoatl spend a great deal of time in locations where they can absorb warmth and sunlight. A black and white picture captioned, "Mexico, 1910" showed an immense version of Harry's new friend basking on a rock. According to the book, this specimen was between 10 and 11 feet long. The creature focused its gaze on the camera, and fanned its wings, stirring up dust. "Vain git," he said, looking up from the picture. only to see Nuala in an almost identical pose, her feathery wings throwing rainbows like a prism. Quetzalcoatl are quite vain, and will often return to locations where they have been treated with respect and admiration. "You're very pretty," Harry said. The tiny serpent fluttered onto his shoulder and buttered his cheek with her feathery head. Harry turned his attention back to the photograph. Most other pictorial records were drawings in the stylized style of the Mesoamerican cultures. Interesting, but more representative of the symbolism of the creature rather than its actual attributes. A strip of feathers ran down its spine, ending in a brilliant tuft on the tip of its tail. A lovely crest with eyes like a peacock's tail adorned its head. The creature in the photo raised and lowered its crest, seeming to flirt with the camera. The face was covered with minuscule scales, though the eyes were a bird's eyes, rather than a snake's. Each foot was covered with a small puff of fluffy feathers. Even in black and white, it was achingly beautiful, and Harry's heart swelled with the thought that one had chosen him. Chapter 19 Letters and Old Friends. Harry raptly watched Nuala eating a relatively immense meal. A lovely bone china plate about the size of a galleon held soft-bodied grubs and a slice of apple. A soft hooting noise caught his attention. "Hedwig," he said, rushing over to his window. Wishing the holes were bigger, he patted his owl as best he could. "A letter," he whispered excitedly. He managed to touch one fingertip to the scroll tied to Hedwig's leg. Resting his forehead against the perforated stone, he sighed. "I really should have explained the window situation to them," he muttered. Nuala glided to the window, chirping inquisitively as she wriggled through one of the holes. Hedwig back-winged in alarm, puffing up to nearly twice her normal size and making angry hissing noises. "Hedwig, don't!" Harry shouted, trying to catch the tip of Nuala's tail and pull her away from the angry owl. Nuala merely flicked her tail out of his reach and skittered up the wall, clinging at eye level with the enraged raptor. Hedwig shrieked threateningly at the snake in her boy's room. True, she could not get in there to protect him, but the snake didn't need to know that. To her shock, the intruder actually left the safety of the stone wall, perching right at eye level. Hedwig paused in her threat display, cocking her head to study the strange creature. It was scaled like a snake, but also feathered like a bird. The eyes were clearly avian, but the shape of the head indicated venom. Nuala introduced herself, and politely asked what business Hedwig had with her familiar. Hedwig rather hotly replied that that was her boy in there, and she did not appreciate interlopers. Nuala acknowledged Hedwig's righteous ire. A wonderful boy like Harry certainly needed such a fierce protector. Hedwig smoothed her feathers, and explained that her boy was indeed wonderful, but many people wanted to hurt him. Bobbing her head in agreement, Nuala explained that she had been sent from very far away to look after Harry. Such a special boy needs special protectors, especially since his two-legged guardian seemed to be doing such a poor job. Hedwig squawked in aggravated agreement. Her boy had been beaten and kidnapped and no one made sure he ate properly. Harry watched in open-mouthed astonishment as Nuala and Hedwig settled in for a long gossip session. After 20 minutes of struggling, swearing, on Harry's part, and squawking, from Hedwig, the three had managed to work the loosely rolled scroll into the window. Harry had to hold some of the torn edges together, but it was mostly legible. "Dear Harry, we received your letter. Thank Merlin you're all right. I know something about pure-blood inheritances, being one myself, and I can tell you you're probably safer than you've even been in your life. Sick, isn't it? Whatever he said about your mum, don't let it bother you. She was a wonderful, smart, and kind person, and nothing will change that. Tell him you need to practice for Quidditch next year. Slytherins are very competitive, so he might let you check out the lay of the land around you. It might help you figure out where you are. I know you're smart and resourceful, but don't try to escape on your own. I'm sure he's got some remarkably nasty security. Merlin knows what kind of creepy shit he's got crawling around there. And you'd be surrounded by jealous Death Eaters who'd love a chance to off their lord's heir. Your heritage doesn't change who you are, Harry. Look at me. I come from a family of mass-murdering psychopaths. Play nice with the other kids, much as it sucks. Albus told me you were almost sorted into Slytherin. Use it. Lion in snake skin, and all. Love always, Sirius. Several hours earlier, Severus slipped into Grimmauld Place, exhausted. Voldemort had cancelled his lessons with Harry for the last several days, instead having him work on several complex potions. He'd barely slept for more than 2 hours at a time, catching catnaps during the various potions' resting stages. heading for the kitchen in desperate need of tea or better yet, coffee. He paused at the sight of a lovely snowy owl picking among the shards of shattered crockery spread over the kitchen floor. Sirius was scribbling frantically on a scroll. "Is that Harry's owl?" he asked. "Yup, the scion of one of the most powerful families in magical Britain," replied eloquently. "She brought a letter from Harry." Severus looked at the owl in awe. "How did she get through the wards?" "No idea," Black said. "What does he say?" Black reluctantly relinquished the letter. "He certainly has a chin-up attitude, doesn't he?" Severus said thoughtfully. Black nodded, looking miserable. "He doesn't want us to worry." "Has anyone told parts 2 and 3 of the trio?" Albus joined them at the table. They would only worry, or perhaps go on some sort of rescue mission. "Eat," he scolded gently, placing a large bowl full of thick stew in front of Severus. Black said, "So how goes life at Shea Snake?" Severus stabbed his mouth with his napkin, and said, "Remarkably well, actually. Harry is advancing quickly in both arithmancy and ancient runes. I am teaching him fencing, and the Dark Lord is teaching him to swim. Harry is eating and sleeping well, and his health is much improved." He darted Albus a sidelong glance. "What about Hogwarts?" Black asked, leaning forward eagerly. He spoke of some sort of arrangement with the family patron. "Apparently, it is reluctant to let Harry leave." "What kind of arrangement? Why doesn't it want him to leave?" The Dark Lord did not share those details. "I think Harry's youth and the poor physical condition he arrived in are important factors in the patron's reluctance." Albus resisted the urge to squirm guiltily as 2 disapproving looks were pinned on him. Sirius peeked into the door of the small upstairs parlor that had become the children's study area. Dumbledore didn't want Ron and Hermione informed of the truth of Harry's situation, but Sirius figured they were owed at least that they'd done more to keep Harry safe than anybody, except maybe Snape, though Sirius would rather kiss Cretcher's warty ass than admit it. Ron was doodling listlessly on scroll, and Hermione was paging through a thick, dusty book. Sirius closed the door quietly behind him, then cleared his throat. Flopping onto a dusty settee, he said, "Dumbledore doesn't want me to worry you with too much information." He tried to moderate his sarcasm. "He really did, but I think you deserve to know." "But you have to swear to keep this between you, and you have to trust us to deal with this." Both nodded eagerly. Sirius braced himself, hoping he was making the right choice. "Earlier this summer, Voldemort kidnapped Harry." "He's fine," he rushed to say, as the 2 blanched. "He managed to sneak a message out. Somehow, Voldemort's made Harry the heir of Slytherin." "The heir ... So he's Lord Slytherin now," Ron said, looking frightened. "Heir ... Lord ... What are you talking about?" Hermione demanded, her brown eyes huge and afraid. Sirius decided to grossly simplify the situation. He was no Ravenclaw, after all. Some of the really old families have a ... unique status in the magical world. The heads of these families have the title of Lord or Lady. Slytherin's one of them. The founder of the house made it a requirement that nobody could become Lord unless they chose an heir. And Harry's it." "Bloody hell," Ron murmured. "The good news is that Voldemort can't hurt his heir. So Harry's safe from him." "Is it because he's a parselmouth?" Hermione whispered. "Probably," Sirius said. "It was as good an excuse as any. Don't let on that you know, to anybody except Harry. And don't talk about it unless absolutely necessary. Look, if you can't deal with this, that's your choice, but decide now." Harry doesn't need to go through that crap. Neither of the pair rushed to affirm their eternal friendship to Harry. Sirius tried not to feel disappointed.